All right, welcome to Causes of European Exploration. I'm going to walk you through a brief presentation here. First of all, when we talk about exploration, we're going to obviously get into Christopher Columbus eventually. But did you know that the Vikings actually explored and actually made landfall in North America about 500 years before Columbus did? We know that the Vikings, which left Europe, the Scandinavia area, settled Iceland and Greenland. We know that Leif Erikson and his brother Thorvald actually went all the way to Newfoundland, which is in present-day Canada, around 1000 AD. And remember that Columbus set sail in 1492. Sorry about the bell that just went off. Thorvald Erickson actually died fighting in North America with some of the Inuit people, some of the natives there. But the Vikings just didn't tell the rest of Europe about their discoveries, and so it never did open up exploration for anyone outside of their culture. Here are the Viking Explorations, here's Scandinavia, which is basically Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark. You can see Iceland, Greenland, and then here's where they came inland over in North America. Interestingly enough, Iceland's actually very nice climate and temperature, and Greenland's basically a big chunk of ice. So the names don't really fit. All right, major causes of exploration. Number one, we're going to talk about the Christian Crusaders bringing back exotic goods. Number two, we're going to talk about Marco Polo and his travels to the Far East. Number three, the Renaissance and new inventions. And number four, the rise of strong nations, which we also call nationalism. Without getting too much into the Christian Crusades, that was a fight between Christians and Muslims over the Holy Land in Jerusalem and Mecca. The war itself is not significant for this topic. What is significant is these European warriors brought back exotic goods from Europe. And when I say exotic, I mean things like sugar and melons and silk and wine, cotton, soap, perfumes, things that Europeans just didn't have access to prior to then. The wealthy Europeans loved these items, and they soon felt that they couldn't live without them. The problem was that these items from the Middle East, the Arabs would only sell to the Italians, and the Italians were then jacking the price up and selling it to the rest of Europe at a higher price. And this is what's called a monopoly. If you ever play the board game Monopoly, you're always trying to take control of a certain side of the board or get all of the utilities. Same thing here. The Arabs and the Italians had a monopoly on the Middle East to Europe trade. Here's the Middle Eastern area I'm talking about. You can see Mecca, and you can see these arrows going into Italy, the little boot country in green here, and then the Italians would sell to the rest of Europe. Cause number two, Marco Polo. You've probably heard of the swimming pool game, Marco Polo. Not really sure how that came to be, other than you're searching for somebody kind of with your eyes closed, and Marco Polo traveled a long way. He was gone from 1271 to 1295. In fact, many people thought he had died. But what happened was he met a Mongolian emperor named Kublai Khan, and Kublai Khan basically kind of held him prisoner, but Marco Polo worked for Kublai Khan, so he wasn't like a prisoner in like a prison or a jail cell, but Kublai Khan basically said, you're not leaving, you're going to be my personal assistant, teach me about European culture, etc. Marco Polo eventually is able to escape that and make his way back to Italy. He writes a book called A Description of the World and talks about all the cool things he saw. Fireworks, postal system, fine silk, jewels, paper money, all kinds of different things. And so here's Italy. He left Venice and he traveled all the way here. Makes his way back. So then following Marco Polo's travels, we're going to jump ahead to 1347. And there's actually a time period called the Black Death. It was a global pandemic on the scale of what we've never seen, not even with what we're experiencing now. And this was from the bubonic plague. And it's an epidemic that lasted about 3 years. Estimates are all over the place. The best estimates that I could see, 25 million Europeans, which was about a third of the population, died from the plague. And there's actually a children's song called Ring Around the Rosie, and I'm sure you've heard of it. How it became a child's song, I don't know. But what does happen is you get these red bumps, and kind of in a ring, and you get chills, fevers, aching muscles, vomiting, diarrhea. Your lymph nodes start to swell. Serious clotting and bleeding under the skin happens, which makes the skin turn black, okay, from the pooling blood underneath. So that's why it's called the Black Plague or the Black Death. This next slide's going to have some pictures. So this is what happens when someone, the pooling of the blood underneath. You can kind of see the rosy red circles initially. You can see the swollen lymph nodes down on this guy right here. So that's what the Black Plague would have looked like, and 25 million Europeans died from that. Very rare cases of it in some third world countries today, but it's pretty much been eradicated. You can see it spreading through Europe. It started down here in Sicily at the base of the boot, and then just made its way all the way up. The only areas that were spared were these little green pockets, and no idea why those areas were spared from it. Following the end of the global pandemic, known as the Black Death or Black Plague, really Europe went through what's called a rebirth or a renaissance. And that's what the word renaissance is, a French word that means rebirth. And so from about 1350 to 1600, it was just this huge outpouring of education. People began studying mathematics and medicine, chemistry, map making, astronomy. And so this rebirth of knowledge and led to the creation of some awesome new inventions and maps that really made Europeans able to explore the world. News of Marco Polo's travels can now be spread quickly through the new printing press invented by Johannes Gutenberg. Several million copies of this were spanning the globe, or not spanning the globe, I guess, spanning Europe by 1500. We have a new ship called a caravel. The astrolabe allowed sailors to determine their latitude by using stars, and then the magnetic compass allowed them to know their direction of travel while at sea. And then that leads us to cause 4. All right, so we've got, let's backtrack. We have Christian crusaders bringing exotic goods back to Europe. We have Marco Polo bringing exotic goods and stories of exotic goods back to Europe. And so that's kind of the drive to why Europeans wanted to go explore. Then they got the inventions during the Renaissance. They had faster ships, they had some navigation tools, some maps. Now all you need are countries that have enough money to finance these voyages. And so England, France, Spain, and Portugal become what we call the 4 strong nations. So the rise of 4 strong nations, basically they're trying to break this monopoly of the Arabs and the Italians. And so they're looking for ocean routes rather than land routes to get to the Far East. And so these kings and queens of these 4 nations were able to finance that. And so again, here's Italy. Italy and Arab are controlling all the land routes. So here are your other European nations, Spain, Portugal, France, and England. And so they're going to start trying to go ocean routes. And so you can see these blue arrows going this way. The Portuguese, with a guy named Bartolome Diaz and Vasco da Gama, were kind of the first two to get to the tip of Africa and realize that we could get around Africa and get over to the Far East. You can see here in India and China. So looking for those ocean routes. What were the goals of these European nations? Well, expand overseas trade and end the monopoly of the Arabs and Italians. They also want to increase their global power, finding new lands. And then they were on a religious mission to spread Christianity to other parts of the world as well. I mentioned Bartholomew Diaz making it to the tip of Africa. And then Columbus is going to set sail, and he's going to go westward in 1492. We'll talk more about Columbus in the coming days. And more about something called the Columbian Exchange. So that's jumping ahead a little bit, so I won't go into a great detail on that just yet. And then Vasco da Gama makes it all the way around Africa to India in 1497. And we will talk more about Columbus in the coming days. Pedro Cabral, his ship gets blown off course and he lands in Portugal. And then we will talk more about some of the early exploration routes, but you can see England, France, Spain, and Portugal all hitting North and South America after Columbus discovers America. And then start making land claims. Europe basically starts saying, I get this, you get that. And meanwhile, the Native Americans are basically being pushed out of their lands. And then that opens up lots of different trade routes between what is considered the New World and the Old World. And again, we will talk more about that with Christopher Columbus. Thanks for watching.